A medical conference? That's what you call sleeping with a stranger? Let me guess, did you play doctor?
My name is Henry Peach, and I used to think I was married to a devoted nurse who occasionally did volunteer work at the local parish. Turns out I was half right about the nurse part, but completely wrong about the devotion. It started with the suitcase. Vivian was packing for what she called a medical conference in Chicago. 3 days of continuing education credits and networking with other healthcare professionals. Noble stuff. The kind of thing a supportive husband encourages because it shows professional growth and dedication to patient care. I was bringing her a cup of coffee when I saw it. A nun's habit folded neatly next to her nursing uniform, and beside that, a 12-pack of condoms still in their pharmacy bag. For a solid 30 seconds, my brain tried to process this information like a computer attempting to run software it wasn't designed for. Nun costume, nurse uniform, industrial supply of prophylactics, medical conference. Either Vivian had developed some very specific continuing education interests, or this wasn't actually about medical conferences. "Honey?" I called out, my voice achieving that careful neutrality I'd perfected during 17 years of marriage. "What's with the Halloween costume?" She emerged from the bathroom, toothbrush in hand, looking like she'd been caught stealing from the church collection plate. "Oh, that. The conference has a themed dinner, Saints and Sinners Night. You know how these medical things get, they try to make everything fun." She delivered this explanation with the same professional confidence she used when explaining why patients needed their medications. "Saints and sinners," I repeated slowly, "at a medical conference. It's about work-life balance, the importance of moral boundaries in healthcare." She was brushing her teeth now, which made her words come out slightly foamy. "Very progressive thinking." "And the condoms?" She paused mid-brush. Through the mirror, I watched her eyes do that calculating thing they did when she was deciding how much truth to mix with her lies. "Free samples. The pharmaceutical rep wanted me to distribute them at the conference. Safe sex education is part of comprehensive healthcare." I nodded thoughtfully. 12 seems like a lot for 3 days of education. It's a big conference. Must be. That night, while Vivian slept the peaceful sleep of someone whose story made perfect sense to them, I lay awake doing the math. 12 condoms, 3 days. Even if this was some kind of avant-garde medical education program, the numbers didn't add up unless Vivian was planning to give a very hands-on demonstration. The next morning, she left for the airport with a kiss on my cheek and a promise to call every evening. Standard business trip protocol, except for the part where I followed her to the parking garage and watched her pull out a small needle from her purse. She spent 5 minutes carefully poking tiny holes in the condom package. Now, I'm not a medical professional, but I'm fairly certain that puncturing prophylactics defeats their primary purpose. Unless the purpose isn't actually prophylactic. Unless the purpose is reproductive. Unless my wife of 17 years is trying to get pregnant by someone who isn't me. I sat in my car for 20 minutes after she drove away, watching other travelers load their luggage and wondering when my marriage had turned into a daytime drama. Then I went home and started doing what any reasonable husband would do when faced with evidence of an elaborate deception. I started investigating. Vivian's phone records were surprisingly easy to access. We shared a family plan, and I handled all the bills. Amazing how transparent your life becomes when you're not actually trying to hide anything. Too bad Vivian hadn't gotten that memo. The most frequently called number over the past 3 months wasn't her hospital, her mother, or any of her nursing friends. It was a local number I didn't recognize. A man answered on the second ring. "Yeah? Is this Garrett?" "Depends who's asking." I could hear the whir of power tools in the background, the scrape of metal on concrete. Construction site, maybe. Or a fabrication shop. "This is Henry Peach. I'm calling about my wife, Vivian." Long pause. Then, "Oh, Duck. Oh, Duck is right, Garrett. Congratulations, by the way." "What?" "You're going to be a daddy. Tell my wife she's homeless now." I hung up before he could respond and immediately started phase 2 of what I decided to call Operation Full Disclosure. Vivian had thoughtfully left her laptop open on the kitchen counter, password saved on all her accounts. Email, social media, photo storage, everything accessible with a simple click. It was like she wanted to be caught, or maybe she'd just gotten sloppy after months of secret planning. The email trail told the whole story. Garrett Blackwood, welding contractor, divorced father of 3, renting a duplex on the west side of town. They'd been seeing each other for 5 months. He thought she was separated. She thought he was going to leave his ex-wife and start fresh. They were both wrong about a lot of things. But the most interesting emails were from the past 2 weeks. Vivian explaining her plan to get pregnant, to force the issue, to make Garrett realize they belonged together. Garrett's responses were less enthusiastic, but not entirely resistant. Apparently, he'd always wanted more kids. Well, congratulations to both of them. They were about to get everything they'd asked for. I spent the morning packing Vivian's belongings. Everything. Clothes, toiletries, books, the porcelain cat collection she'd started in college, the nursing textbooks she'd kept from school, her half of our wedding china. Everything that marked Vivian Peach as a resident of this house went into boxes and garbage bags with the systematic efficiency of someone who'd spent 17 years learning her organizational preferences. By noon, our house looked like Vivian had never existed. Loading my pickup took 3 trips. Garrett's address was in a neighborhood I'd driven through but never really noticed. Modest duplexes, gravel driveways, boats, and RVs parked in side yards. The American dream scaled down to fit blue-collar budgets. Garrett's place had a decent lawn and a welding truck in the driveway that looked like it could survive an apocalypse. I was stacking boxes by his front door when it opened. "Can I help you?" The woman was maybe 35, brunette, wearing scrubs with cartoon characters on them. She had the efficient look of someone who juggled multiple jobs and still made time for her kids' soccer games. "Are you Mrs. Blackwood?" "Ex-Mrs. Blackwood. Stephanie, are you—" "Henry Peach. I believe you know my wife, Vivian." Her face went through several expressions before settling on grim understanding. "Oh, you're the husband." "Was. Past tense as of about 4 hours ago." She looked at the boxes, then at me, then back at the boxes. "Is that all her stuff?" "Everything that matters. Garrett home. He's at the shop. But he called about an hour ago. Said something about needing to talk to me about Vivian, about maybe her staying here for a while." She paused. "He mentioned something about a baby." I nodded. "Vivian's been planning a surprise. Thought you should probably know before she shows up with her luggage and her reproductive agenda." Stephanie laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Reproductive agenda? Jesus Christ." "She punctured the condoms," I said, "this morning before she left for her fake business trip. Thought you might want to warn Garrett that his girlfriend is trying to make some unilateral decisions about their future." "Son of a bitch!" Stephanie sat down on her front steps like her legs had given out. "He told me she was separated. Said you two were already getting divorced." "News to me. Yesterday morning, I was a happily married man bringing his wife coffee while she packed for a medical conference. Amazing how quickly things change." We sat there for a moment, 2 people whose lives had been rearranged by other people's lies. "So what now?" Stephanie asked. "Now Vivian gets to explain to Garrett why she's homeless, pregnant, and looking for a place to stay. And Garrett gets to explain to you why his separated girlfriend just became his very available, very fertile ex-girlfriend. And you? I get to start over, 17 years older, considerably wiser, and significantly more cynical about human nature." Stephanie picked up one of the boxes and examined the address label. "Vivian Peach. Sounds so normal when you write it down like that." "She can keep the name if she wants. I'm done with it." "What if she comes back? What if she realizes she made a mistake?" I stood up and brushed off my jeans. "Stephanie, your ex-husband is about to find out that his girlfriend has been lying about her marital status, her birth control, and her living situation. My wife is about to find out that her boyfriend's ex-wife knows all about their affair, their pregnancy plans, and her new homeless status. And in about 6 hours, when Vivian calls from Chicago to check in on her devoted husband, she's going to discover that devoted husbands don't stick around for women who try to get pregnant by other men." That's not really an answer. Sure it is. It's just not the answer she's going to want to hear. I gave Stephanie my phone number and told her to call if Vivian showed up looking for me. Then I drove home to my house that no longer had any evidence Vivian had ever existed, opened a beer, and waited for the phone to ring. It rang at 7:23 p.m. "Hi, sweetheart. How was your day?" Vivian's voice was bright and cheerful, the voice of someone who thought she was still successfully managing a double life. The voice of someone who had no idea her husband had spent the day relocating her entire existence. "Educational," I said. "Very enlightening. How's the conference?" "Oh, you know how these things are. Lots of lectures, lots of networking. The hotel is gorgeous, though. Incredible view of the lake." "Staying busy?" "Extremely busy. Back-to-back seminars. I'm learning so much about advanced patient care methodologies." "Advanced methodologies? Sounds intensive." "It is. Very hands-on." She giggled at her own joke. "But enough about work. What did you do today?" Cleaned house, did some organizing, made some phone calls. Very productive day all around. That's wonderful, darling. I should go. We have a dinner presentation starting soon. Saints and Sinners theme, remember? Right, the moral boundaries thing. Exactly, love you. Love you too, Vivian. I meant it too. That was the worst part. Even knowing what I knew, even after spending the day boxing up her life, I still loved the woman I'd married 17 years ago. I just didn't know who this woman was anymore. The second call came at 11:47 p.m. Henry? Vivian's voice was different now. Tight, scared, confused. Yeah? I just got off the phone with Garrett. Did you? How's Garrett doing? He says you called him. He says you told him about the baby. Well, it seemed like the kind of news an expectant father should hear directly. Congratulations, by the way. When's the due date? You might want to start calculating from this weekend, assuming your plan works. Long silence. Then, how did you know? About the punctured condoms? Or about the fact that you've been sleeping with a welding contractor for 5 months while telling me you were volunteering at the church? Henry, I can explain. I'm sure you can. You're very creative. Medical conferences, saints and sinners dinners, pharmaceutical samples, very imaginative storytelling. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Another silence. What do you mean? I mean, Garrett's ex-wife Stephanie is a very reasonable woman. We had a long conversation today while I was delivering your belongings to Garrett's duplex. Turns out she had no idea Garrett was seeing a married woman. Also turns out she's not as understanding about Garrett's extracurricular activities as you might have hoped. You delivered my... What do you mean? My belongings? Everything, Vivian. Clothes, books, your grandmother's cat collection, your nursing textbooks. Everything that belonged to Vivian Peach is now sitting on Garrett's front porch, waiting for him to figure out what to do with it. You can't do that. That's my stuff. That's my house. Was your house. Was your stuff. Past tense, present tense, you're a single woman with a suitcase full of costumes and punctured condoms, calling your ex-husband from a hotel room where you're pretending to be at a medical conference. Ex-husband? Did I stutter? Tomorrow morning I'm filing for divorce. Adultery, abandonment, fraud, the holy trinity of marital dissolution. My lawyer thinks it's going to be refreshingly straightforward. Henry, please, let me explain. Let me come home. We can work this out. Home is Garrett's duplex now. I suggest you call him and see if Stephanie's in a sharing mood. This is insane. You're being insane. I'm being thorough. There's a difference. I could hear her breathing, could picture her in whatever hotel room she'd actually booked, trying to figure out how her perfect plan had turned into a perfect disaster. What if I'm pregnant? She asked finally. Then Garrett's going to be a daddy, and you're going to be a single mother, and I'm going to be a divorced man who dodged a bullet. Seems like everyone gets what they wanted. That's not what I wanted. Sure it is. You wanted excitement. You wanted passion. You wanted to feel desired by someone who didn't know all your flaws and quirks and boring Tuesday night habits. You wanted to be someone different, someone more interesting than Henry Peach's wife. Congratulations. Now you get to find out who that someone is. Henry? Vivian, in 17 years of marriage, you never lied to me. Not once. Not about money, not about your family, not about your feelings, not about anything that mattered. And then in 5 months, you lied about everything. Where you were going, who you were seeing, what you were doing, what you wanted. You even lied about birth control. I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. You knew you wanted to get pregnant by another man. That seems pretty specific to me. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen, Vivian? Were you going to come home pregnant and tell me it was a miracle? Were you going to leave Garrett and raise his child as mine? Were you going to keep lying until the baby looked like a welder instead of an accountant? No answer. Or were you just going to keep living 2 lives until one of them exploded? I thought I could figure it out. Well, congratulations, it's figured out. The third call came at 2:43 a.m. Henry, I'm at Garrett's house. How's that going? Stephanie won't let me in. She says Garrett's not here, but his truck is in the driveway. Maybe he's not ready for visitors. All my stuff is still on the porch. It's starting to rain. Better move it inside somewhere. I don't have anywhere to move it. I don't have anywhere to go. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the needle, the condoms, the 5 months of lies. You could try a hotel, preferably one with a medical conference going on. Don't be a bastard, Henry. Don't be a cheating wife, Vivian. I made a mistake. You made 100 mistakes. The pregnancy thing wasn't a mistake. That was a plan. A terrible plan, but definitely intentional. I just wanted to feel wanted again. And now you know how it feels to be unwanted. Educational, isn't it? She started crying. Real tears. Not the manipulative kind she used when she wanted me to fix something or buy something or forgive something. These were the tears of someone whose life had just collapsed in ways they hadn't anticipated. Please, Henry, let me come home. Let me explain everything. There's nothing to explain. You wanted a different life and now you have one. Congratulations. This isn't what I wanted. Then you should have thought about that before you started poking holes in condoms. I hung up and turned off my phone. The next morning, I drove past Garrett's duplex on my way to work. Vivian's Prius was parked in the street, and she was sitting on the front steps surrounded by boxes and garbage bags. She looked like a refugee from her own life. I didn't stop. At lunch, I called Stephanie. "How's the situation over there?" "Complicated," she said. Garrett came home around 1 in the morning, completely hammered. He and Vivian had it out on the front lawn. Half the neighborhood heard them. What's the verdict? He doesn't want anything to do with her. Says she lied about being separated, lied about birth control, lied about everything. He told her to find somewhere else to go. And Vivian? Still sitting on my porch like a stray cat. I almost feel sorry for her. Don't. She made her choices. What if she really is pregnant? Then she'll figure it out. People do. You're really done with her, aren't you? Stephanie, if your ex-husband had spent 5 months lying to you about being single, then tried to get pregnant by another woman to force some kind of decision, would you take him back? Point taken. Vivian wanted to be someone else. Now she gets to find out who that someone else is. That evening, Vivian showed up at my office. I was finishing paperwork when she knocked on the door. She looked terrible. Hair unwashed, clothes wrinkled, eyes red from crying. She looked like someone whose life had imploded in ways they hadn't seen coming. "Can we talk?" she asked. "We're talking. Can I sit down?" I gestured to the chair across from my desk. She sat carefully, like someone who wasn't sure the furniture would support her. "I made a mistake," she said. "Which one? The affair, the lies, or the pregnancy scheme?" "All of it. Everything. I was stupid and selfish, and I ruined everything good in my life." "Yes, you did. Can you forgive me?" I leaned back in my chair and studied the woman I'd been married to for 17 years. She looked like Vivian, sounded like Vivian, but she was a stranger. The Vivian I'd married wouldn't have cheated. The Vivian I'd married wouldn't have lied. The Vivian I'd married wouldn't have tried to get pregnant by another man. "Vivian, do you know what I do for a living? You're a forensic accountant. I investigate financial fraud. People lie to me every day about transactions, about assets, about their circumstances. And every day, I figure out what really happened versus what people want me to believe happened. I know. So when you tell me you made a mistake, I know you're lying. When you tell me you were confused, I know you're lying. When you tell me you want to come home, I know you're lying. I'm not lying. You spent 5 months planning to get pregnant by another man. That's not confusion, Vivian. That's strategy. Terrible strategy, but definitely intentional." She started crying again. "I don't know what I was thinking. You were thinking you could have both lives, the security of being married to me and the excitement of being with Garrett. You were thinking you could get pregnant and somehow make it work out. You were thinking you were smarter than everybody else. I was wrong. Yes, you were. About everything. So, what happens now?" I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a manila envelope. "Divorce papers, signed and filed this morning. You can contest them if you want, but given the circumstances, I don't think that's going to work out in your favor." She took the envelope like it might explode. "Henry, please, we can get counseling. We can work through this." "No, we can't. Because I don't trust you anymore. Because every time you're 5 minutes late or make a phone call I don't recognize or go to the store for milk, I'm going to wonder what you're really doing. Because you destroyed 17 years of marriage for 5 months of excitement. It wasn't about the excitement. What was it about? I felt invisible, like I was just Henry's wife, not Vivian. Like I was disappearing into our routine, our marriage, our life. Garrett made me feel significant. And now? Now I feel like nothing. I almost felt sorry for her then. Almost. But sympathy doesn't undo betrayal, and understanding doesn't excuse lies. Vivian, you were never invisible to me. You were my partner, my best friend, the person I chose to build a life with. If you felt like you were disappearing, you should have talked to me. If you needed excitement, we could have found it together. If you wanted to feel significant, we could have worked on that. I tried to talk to you. No, you didn't. You decided I was the problem and Garrett was the solution, and you never gave me a chance to be part of the conversation. I'm sorry. I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't give me back 17 years of trust. Sorry doesn't make me forget that you were willing to let me raise another man's child as my own. She sat there holding the divorce papers, looking like someone who'd finally realized the full scope of what she'd lost. Where am I supposed to go? She asked finally. I don't know, Vivian. That's your problem now. I don't have any money. I don't have anywhere to stay. You have a job. You have friends. You have family. You have a car and a suitcase and all the freedom you wanted. I don't want freedom. I want to come home. Home doesn't want you back. She left the divorce papers on my desk and walked out without another word. I watched through the window as she got into her Prius and drove away, and for the first time in 3 days, I felt something other than anger. I felt relief. 6 months later, I was having coffee with Stephanie Blackwood at the diner downtown. How are you adjusting to single life? She asked. Better than I expected. Quieter, but better. Any regrets? About the divorce? No. About the way I handled it? Sometimes. What would you have done differently? I stirred my coffee and thought about it. Maybe I would have been less dramatic. Maybe I would have tried harder to understand why she did what she did before I decided to punish her for it. But you still would have divorced her? Absolutely. Trust isn't something you can repair like a broken appliance. Once it's gone, it's gone. What about Vivian? Any idea how she's doing? She moved to Seattle, got a job at a hospital there. According to mutual friends, she's not pregnant, so either the punctured condoms didn't work or Garrett was more careful than she anticipated. And Garrett? Still welding, still renting that duplex. Still not interested in complicated women with complicated agendas. Stephanie laughed. Smart man. Smart enough. How about you? Any prospects? I'm taking a sabbatical from men for a while. Turns out they're more complicated than I thought. Fair enough. We sat in comfortable silence. Two people who'd been collateral damage in other people's bad decisions, trying to figure out what came next. Henry? Stephanie said finally. Yeah? For what it's worth, I think Vivian was an idiot. Yeah, I said. She was. But she was my idiot for 17 years, and I miss that sometimes. The idiot or the 17 years? Both, I guess. The woman I married wasn't an idiot. She was smart and funny and kind and honest. I don't know when she turned into someone who would puncture condoms and lie about medical conferences. People change. Yeah, they do. The trick is figuring out whether they changed into someone better or someone worse. And Vivian? I finished my coffee and left money on the table. Vivian changed into someone I didn't recognize. Maybe that someone is better for someone else. But she wasn't better for me. I walked Stephanie to her car and drove home to my house that was finally starting to feel like home again, instead of a crime scene. I'd rearranged the furniture, painted the bedroom, replaced the wedding photos with pictures of places I wanted to travel. The house was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was full of possibilities instead of lies, and that felt like progress. Sometimes late at night, I wondered if I'd been too harsh. If I could have handled Vivian's betrayal with more grace, more forgiveness, more understanding of whatever midlife crisis had turned my honest wife into a cheating stranger. But then I'd remember the needle, the condoms, the 5 months of elaborate lies, and I'd realize that grace has its limits. Forgiveness has its boundaries. Understanding doesn't always lead to reconciliation. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone who's trying to destroy your life is to let them go find their own. Vivian had wanted to be someone different, someone more exciting, someone worth lying for. Now she got to spend the rest of her life finding out who that someone was. And I got to spend the rest of mine being grateful I didn't have to watch. The final twist came 8 months later, on a Tuesday morning when Stephanie called me at work. Henry, you need to know something about Vivian. What now? She's back in town, and she's definitely pregnant. I sat down heavily in my office chair. How pregnant? Very, like, about to pop any day now pregnant. And Garrett? Says it's not his, says the timing doesn't work out, says she must have been seeing someone else too. I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. Of course she was. Vivian always was an overachiever. There's more, Stephanie said. She's been calling around town, trying to find someone who'll take her in. Apparently, things didn't work out in Seattle either. Let me guess, she told her new boyfriend she was divorced, got pregnant, and he figured out she was lying about something important. How did you know? Because people don't change, Stephanie. They just get better at lying to themselves about who they really are. She called me yesterday, asked if I thought you might take her back now that she's learned her lesson. And what did you tell her? I told her that some lessons come too late to matter. Good advice. She's staying at the motel on Highway 9, room 247 if you're interested. I'm not. I didn't think you would be, but I thought you should know. That evening, driving home from work, I found myself taking the long way past the Highway 9 motel. I told myself it was just curiosity, just wanting to see how the story ended. But really, I think I needed to know that my decision to walk away had been the right one. Vivian's Prius was parked outside room 247, looking as tired and worn out as its owner probably was. The curtains were drawn, but I could see the blue glow of a television through the thin fabric. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, engine running, thinking about the woman inside that motel room. 17 years of marriage, 5 months of lies, and now she was alone and pregnant with a child that might belong to any number of men she'd deceived along the way. I could have knocked on that door, could have offered her a place to stay until the baby came, could have tried to rebuild something from the wreckage of our marriage. But I didn't, because some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt, because some trust, once broken, can't be repaired, because some people, once they show you who they really are, deserve to be believed. I drove home to my quiet house, my orderly life, my peaceful existence. It wasn't the life I'd planned when I married Vivian 17 years ago, but it was honest. It was real. It was mine. And for the first time since finding that needle and those punctured condoms, that felt like enough. 3 days later, Stephanie called to tell me Vivian had given birth to a healthy baby girl. The father was still unknown, paternity test pending. Vivian had listed him as Henry Peach on the birth certificate, but my lawyer was already filing papers to dispute that claim. You could ask for a paternity test, Stephanie said, just to be sure. I don't need a test, I said. I know exactly when Vivian and I last slept together, and it wasn't 9 months ago. So what happens to the baby? That's not my problem anymore. And Vivian? Also not my problem. You really are done with her, aren't you? Stephanie, some people spend their whole lives trying to figure out who they are. Vivian spent 5 months showing me exactly who she was. I'm just smart enough to pay attention. And who was she? Someone who thought lying was easier than telling the truth? Someone who thought deception was simpler than honesty? Someone who thought she could have everything she wanted without paying the price for any of it? And now she gets to find out what that price actually was. I hung up the phone and went back to my quiet Tuesday evening, my honest life, my peaceful existence. Somewhere across town, Vivian was learning to be a single mother with a questionable past and an uncertain future. I didn't feel sorry for her. I didn't feel angry at her. I didn't feel anything at all. And that, I realized, was exactly how it should be. The woman I'd loved for 17 years had died the moment she picked up that needle and started poking holes in those condoms. What was left was a stranger who happened to share her name and her face, but not her heart, not her soul, not her integrity. I'd mourned that death already. I'd grieved that loss. I'd buried that marriage. What happened to the stranger was none of my business. Henry Peach was finally, completely, blessedly free.